We are happy to welcome you to our webinar, and we invite enthusiastic individuals approaching retirement to participate in this webinar, focusing on entrepreneurship to achieve financial independence and to secure your retirement. The webinar will inspire participants to explore innovative business opportunities while planning for your future stability. It will also introduce you to a short learning program offered by the Johannesburg Schools Center of Entrepreneurship in partnership with the NSG. This is a transformative program designed to support and empower those approaching retirement, helping them be prepared for the next chapter of their lives. The program is also aimed at supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs in reaching their full potential by providing the skills and structured support needed to address daily challenges that impact growth. As individuals transition from full-time employment into retirement, it becomes increasingly important to explore new opportunities, develop practical skills, and gain knowledge that supports financial independence and personal growth. The program aims to equip participants with valuable entrepreneurial skills and strategic knowledge to help navigate life beyond the workplace by offering practical insights into financial planning, venturing into business, and effectively engaging with SARS requirements to understand compliance better. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our webinar. My name is Louise Lepine. I'm the Program Director of the session, and I'm also the Chief Director at the National School of Government. Let me introduce you to our guest speakers. They are Mr. Selebogo Molefe, Mr. Pila Sokela, and Dr. Senzo Mqobo, as well as Ms. Holly Kaba from the Johannesburg School, the Johannesburg Business School Center of Entrepreneurship. They will be talking to us a little bit about the program. And at the end of the session, we invite you to participate by plotting your questions in the question and answer boxes, as well as flighting any concerns that you might have as you approach your retirement. This is the first engagement that the School of Government is having regarding retirement and entrepreneurship, specifically for this part of our government personnel. And so we're looking forward to a very exciting time with our guest speakers. Let me introduce Mr. Selebogo Molefe. He is going to speak to us about the concept of entrepreneurship for public servants. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He's an entrepreneur, he's an author. He's also a grassroots ecosystem architect, and is also the host of the UFM Business Hour. He operates at the high tension intersection of corporate strategy and street level reality. As a co-founder of THUD, the People's Fund, the People's Stokvel CFI, the BizPlug, and the Share the Codes, he has helped mobilize over 350 million in funding for SMEs. He's built the pipes that connect informal businesses to formal capital. Ladies and gentlemen, be welcome, and let us welcome our guest speaker, Mr. Selebogo Molefe. Over to you, sir.
Unmute. My video is on. Good morning, everybody. I hope we're well. I just need to change this background. I don't know what happened.
It's fine. Please continue, sir.
All right. All right. By way of introduction, just one more time, I'm involved in this space because I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been very fortunate to build businesses, and as well as to back up a lot of entrepreneurs who have been able to build their own businesses. And it's just one of those environments where what is important is about figuring out ideas first, and what I've been tasked to do for this session is to kind of help somebody who's thinking about entering the space of entrepreneurship to think about what does that actually mean, right? So my presentation will come from that basis, that our ideation process and entering the space of entrepreneurship when we haven't been entrepreneurs before, there are some things that we really need to be thinking about, and that, it is a scary world. It is very scary to change anything and to start something new, but it's not impossible. That is pretty much what I want to invest on you. I am the type of person who likes to be interrupted. I am an entrepreneur after all. I'm a problem solver, and I'm not on the screen, on the Zoom screen. So I'm on my presentation now. So if there is a query or a question, I would appreciate hearing a voice. So please work with me on that basis. All right, let's get straight into it. What are the big challenges that we're currently facing now? I mean, it's 30 years plus into democracy, and we have an economy that's got its challenges, but we also have a country that has got so many problems. And if there's one thing about entrepreneurs, we love problems. And wherever there's chaos, wherever there's a lot of problems, there's an opportunity to solve for that and monetize that in the process. But it is about sustainable entrepreneurship. It is about sustainable building more than anything. And we've got to realize that we've got some superpowers amongst us. One of the things that we have been able to do as professionals over the last 30 years, if you've been employed in the public sector for that long, is that you've got some knowledge, you've got some real insights, you've got some problems that have always bothered you, and now you have a chance to do something about it without the pressure. But we must de-risk that environment. We must think about what does it actually mean to step into the world of entrepreneurship, or maybe let's park that word entrepreneurship, to step into the world of problem solving. And it's not always about solving a problem, right? Sometimes it's just about it's not always about entrepreneurship or solving a problem. It's also about spotting opportunities. I mean, I think a lot of people can argue that we do not actually need Apple as a company, or Apple products, whether it's a MacBook or an iPhone or any of these. These are innovations that were built on the back of design. But here we are, and we have Apple as one of the most valuable companies in the world. Why? Because it's a desirable product to have. I use multiple Apple products in my own ecosystem, and they're expensive and absolutely unnecessary for me, but I want it. So it's very important for us to be able to have that sense that, why am I getting into the space? Am I trying to solve a problem? And if I'm trying to solve a problem, what is this problem that I'm obsessed about? And I think what the course will help us with as we go through the course at the Center for Entrepreneurship is to figure out what that pathway looks like. What is this roadmap? And what are some of the things that I need to be really obsessing around? I mean, my reality as an entrepreneur and as somebody who supports entrepreneurs all the time is that unless you have a balance I have a philosophy of a drie food pizza, or a pot with 3 legs, right? And it's always about cash flow, customers, and compliance. And if you've got these 3 things embedded down, your drie food will always be a bit more balanced, and therefore sishebo in the pot will not fall out. And I like using that analogy because it helps us to actually understand the concept of entrepreneurship and some of the core things that are embedded in there. I mean, I deliver the communication session because I am about pitching and helping people to raise capital, to communicate their value proposition across, and to make sure that they're actually understood for what they're trying to communicate across, right? But you can't get there unless you know what is it that you are solving for. So we are going to really just try and unpack a little bit of that. And, of course, we normally do this over hours, but today we've got 30 minutes to kind of unpack that philosophy quite quickly. One thing that we must break as an illusion is the tender trap. And I've seen it a lot of times, and not only from people who are getting into retirement, but a lot of people who leave their jobs, or even people who call themselves entrepreneurs, is that if you're relying on the tender trap, you've got to think about something. Entrepreneurship is about solving a problem over and over. And it's got to have a repetitive process to it, right? And once it's repetitive, you can build systems behind it. So when we talk about the customer or the process of customer development, it's really about thinking about, if I pick this problem or if I pick this opportunity, is it going to pay me on a monthly basis? Is it going to be repetitive? Can I build a system behind it? And if I can't, maybe I need to park certain things. We all have beginner's luck. So relying just on tenders is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. So you've got to just tread carefully. I'm being very careful to not say, do not go for tenders. I am saying they're inconsistent in the way that they come out as work. And therefore, if that is your only dependence, I have seen many fall. So careful of thinking about it from that perspective. Also, the other thing that we are taught traditionally is that entrepreneurship is about putting together a business plan, and then I go to IDC or NEF to go and submit my business plan. The reality on the ground, though, is a bit different. Entrepreneurship is about testing first. Nobody wants to spend money on you unless you are testing something against the marketplace, and the market is giving you feedback. So it's a process. It's an iterative process where you're constantly engaging people out there, and if they're responding by either paying you or giving you letters of intent saying they're interested in this, you've got to have proof. You've got to be validating this process over and over. And that's ultimately what has helped people like me to build the types of businesses that we have built over the years, right? And also, it's not about blind hustling. And I think this is where the Center for Entrepreneurship comes into play most importantly. It has made an impact personally on me as an entrepreneur myself, because you realize that as you engage so many entrepreneurs over and over, you can't be hustling blind when it comes to this. It's not a gamble. Like, entrepreneurship is not about just taking chances and hoping something sticks. It is a process, and it is driven by certain principles. One of them is being able to understand that you're solving a problem. And if you're solving a problem, it means you're designing an ecosystem for a value proposition. And in designing for a strong value proposition means you're providing solutions to the marketplace that they can buy over and over. So let us just have that in our minds over and over, that it is not just about taking chances and saying, let's see what sticks. Try and identify problems you are familiar with, problems that you have expertise in. And even if you do not have expertise, it mustn't be something that is too far off from your current skill set, because it will frustrate you, it will drain your pocket, and nobody wants to lose money, especially in their later stages of life. It's just not a nice feeling to have. And I've seen many people lose money unnecessarily. One of the things that I identified as I was doing research is that you've got institutional capital. That is ultimately your superpower. And I think that's what I opened with as well. All of this institutional knowledge that you have within you and the networks that come with that, the social currency that you have in that, the ability to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody senior in a different organization, you've got to lean into that and almost document that and think about, what does this actually mean before I decide I'm going to solve specific problems, And also, I think there's something beautiful about starting a business later in life, is that you know exactly where the friction lies in the system. You know what problems exist and are currently not being solved. Whereas if you are in your early stages, like the country supports a lot of youth-owned businesses. And then we see the failure rate compounding on that side, right? Because why? They're young, they must be testing things out, and there's also a lot of stupidity in that process, and it's just part of the process of what must happen. But in your later stages, you are more risk averse. You don't just want to spend money unnecessarily. You do not want to gamble with your time. And also, you're tired. You don't want to solve the wrong problems, right? You want to be excited about this thing, but it must not drain you. It must not take the life out of you, right? And that is important for us to understand from a mindset perspective. We must have that mindset shift when we think about, okay, if I'm going to participate in this course, it mustn't just be because, okay, government is paying for this. UJ is offering it. Let me get in and see. I think take a step back and be like, what problem do I want to solve and why? And there is a process to that. It's called the Lean Startup Framework, and it works. It works. You can see it from first world countries all the way into the global south. A lot of entrepreneurs and business owners who have cracked it and who have gone on to raise multiple rounds of funding, they have followed a process. And quite often it comes with mentorship as well. It's hard to go the journey alone, and it's also not necessary. There's something that Steve Blank talks about quite often. He's the father of Lean Startup, right? And, And I'm introducing this concept because when we think about entrepreneurship in the traditional sense, somebody's going to say, complete a business plan. Here's a template, fill it in, go and submit it at business partners. Business partners rejects it almost immediately. And you get so frustrated. You know, I don't know why they're doing this to me. I need funding. I can't start this business without funding. The challenge is multi-layered. And one of the biggest challenges is that we tend to do what we call desktop research a lot. And if you're going with that premise that I am going to find information online, I mean, I've got AI as well that can help me find these facts. The reality is that there are no facts inside the building. It's only opinions inside the building because customers vote with their pockets. Think about your own money that you spend. You spend it where you want. People might make assumptions about what your needs are, but they will not spend, you will not spend money on them unless it resonates with you. That is the reality of entrepreneurship. And one of the cornerstones of why we fail so much over and over. We experience such high failure rates because we are not out there seeking out facts. And there is a process of how you can go out to seek those facts, speak to actual people, get the information, collect it. And a lot of you have been through the academic process, so you would know about research, you would know about interviews. The process is no different when it comes to engaging in the entrepreneurship leg. The only difference, and I want to stress this because it's something that I would love for some of us to obsess over as we go even through this course, is that you cannot rely on hearsay. You cannot rely on what third parties are telling you. You cannot rely on surveys. Why? Because we are all nice to people when they're asking us for feedback. But when you talk to people, when you ask certain questions that are discovery questions in their sense, it helps you to unearth the real problem, because you will come out with a hypothesis. You will say, here's the problem that I'm trying to solve for in this particular way. That is an assumption you have made. It's not a fact. And that is fine because you have to start somewhere. And then as you go through the process over and over, you will realize through the feedback that you're getting that, oh, I thought this thing is this, but actually it is on this other side. And I'll give you a classical example. When we started our funding business, we started off as a crowdfunding business. We made the assumption that because we were those Black entrepreneurs, we said Black entrepreneurs are struggling to access capital from traditional institutions. It's just hard to access capital in this country. That is the reality. So we said, let's go the crowdfunding route. And as we went through crowdfunding, we were raising the money, but we couldn't collect the money up until we hit our targets. And sometimes a round could go for 3 months, but a business runs on a monthly basis. You've got bills to pay, you've got salaries to pay. There's all sorts of costs that are embedded in there. And then we realized that there was an opportunity with entrepreneurs who were coming with tenders. They were saying, hey, I don't have a product that you can crowdfund for, but I've got this tender from Eskom. They need this part and they're going to be paying me next week. Here's the proof. And then we would call Eskom, get the information accordingly, get the proof. And then we started testing slowly, like, would this work or not, right? We moved from a company that was doing about 2 to 3 million rand in fund collection from a crowdfunding perspective to a company that ended up becoming 100 million rand a year business, just purely by listening to the customer. Why? There's no facts inside the building. That is the reality. And when you assume that what you have on your desktop are facts, you're going to fail. You are guaranteed to fail. Data proves it over and over. This is why we've got such a high failure rate. What we are trying to do in this environment is to de-risk that. First, by going through the entrepreneurship education that the institution is offering, but more importantly, to help you understand from a mindset shift perspective that you have to speak to people. There's no magic beyond it. You can't do it without that. So that is an important one that I really wanted to highlight. And customer development and customer discovery are the cornerstone of entrepreneurship, in my view, because without customers, you can't have money. There's nobody who's going to give you that cash flow, that funding that you're looking for, unless you're coming with a promise of pay from customers, right? So you've got to be thinking about that. And also, finding the friction is something that you might not realize that you already possess. You are already within the institution of government. You've had years of experience. There's certain things that you've noticed over and over that just are frustrating for other people. And you look at it, you're like, I know how I could solve this. And maybe you haven't had the chance, and maybe you haven't exploded to that extent, or you've been limited by the fact that you are within the institution of government for you to be able to solve it. But now, as you are heading into retirement, you can start testing and tinkering and talking to people. That is ultimately what this is about. Like the example that we're making on the screen is that, it could be that a Department of Labor experience, you know exactly why SMEs are struggling with UIF compliance. And can you see what I'm trying to do with these examples? I'm trying to show you that there's high touch problems that you can look into that do not require heavy capex, because if you must spend heavily on capital expenditure, it becomes high risk for you, because every day you are worried about, I need to make my money back. And what I'm trying to encourage as you come into a course like this is that do not sit there and think about you're going to spend your pension money. I actually discourage it. Do not even touch your pension money from that perspective. Just think about what are problems that exist within the service ecosystem. They do exist. And then what is the roadmap that you can use? This course exists for such. And people like us here who are part of the guest speakers are here to guide with that process, because that's what the university employs our services for. And we bring in industry expertise and experience, and the real, what's happening in the real world, we try and bring it into thinking here as we take you through the courses, right? So please always remember this. If there's anything to remember, is that you don't touch your pension money. I've seen a lot of people do it. My mom almost did it. She's 70 now. She was a nurse all her life, and now she's retired. And she works within the church, and she's happy in terms of how she lives her life right now. But there was a point where she was thinking about buying into a franchise. But her idea was, I'll tap into my pension money for this because it will sustain me. But having seen and experienced all sorts of other things out there, and seeing other people who are losing their money, she realized that maybe that was not the smartest way to go about things. So the biggest thing that we must obsess over is figuring out, what is the problem in the marketplace? Is it a validated problem? And is it big enough to pay me? Is it sustainable in solving? And if it's not, it's okay to walk away. So fall in love with the problem. Do not fall in love with your ideas. So fall in love with testing the problems that you've made assumptions around, and then think constantly over and over around, is this going to be a sustainable approach to problem solving? And you don't have to spend money to do that. You have to talk to people. Remember what I said about getting out of the building? Those are some of the concepts that we really dig deep into as we go through this type of course, right? Now, some of the things that I thought about as I was thinking about an impact-driven enterprise, from a sustainability perspective, is that we're well aware that, most times if you're going into retirement, you don't want new stress. You don't really want to start a heavy business because you don't have the type of energy that somebody like me at 45 has, right? Or a young person at 30 has, where they can still manage to deal with 5, 10, 20, 100 employees and take all of the stresses that come with that. Because the reality is that when you get into entrepreneurship, sleeping becomes a rumor. And you've been working all your life so that when you retire, sleeping is not a rumor. You can actually sleep, right? So think about that you can test out with low-hanging fruits. There's so many things, from problem solving within the business-to-business environment to the business-to-consumer environment, where my colleague Pilar, for instance, will touch a lot around the digital economy. There's so many things that you can do there, from selling second-hand goods to, there's so many things that you can experience where you don't have to spend your own money. And that's ultimately what we are trying to bring to our attention as we take you through a course of this nature. I mean, one of the critical things that those who are trying to stay away from stress is that you can get into advisory and consulting. When you think about your skill set, let me give you a classical case. A lot of the entrepreneurs and business owners that we work with, and especially the QSEs are businesses that are doing between 10 and 50 million rand in South Africa. A lot of them have figured out their market. They've figured out who the customer is. But from a strategy point of view, they lack a lot. And what do they lack? An advisory board. An advisory board is a group of people who are not legal in the company structure, because there is no board, like there's only a board of directors. So QSEs can't afford to have an official board, but they need to be compliant at that level so that they can grow beyond the 50 million rand. Somebody like you, who's got a high level skill set in a particular domain, it could be an engineering company that you're giving advice to, that you're also helping from a strategy point of view with accessing new markets and new clients that they wouldn't have normally thought about. That is a service you can offer and get paid for. You can be part of an advisory board of small businesses and get paid because they need the service. Or you could consult on a particular thing if they don't want you on an advisory board. Like the business of advice is, it's quite a big sector in South Africa. So think about that. And not just small businesses, within the corporate sector, there's so many companies that are looking for skilled people. And the more senior you are, even better when they can get you at a fractional rate, because you would just be offering that service and not necessarily being absorbed into their workforce, right? So think about it from that perspective, because I think what it does for you, that it buys you joy. What does this joy look like? It looks like you not having to work 8 to 5 every day. It's you offering services when they are necessary. That's what I wanted to highlight around that. And, I want to leave you with just some thoughts around this, that, first of all, you've got to protect that pension that you have. A lot of people who are getting into retirement get sold on franchises. I've been in franchising. There is no easy franchise, by the way. And no matter how well you are sold a thing, you have to look at it multiple times through different lenses to really think about, is it the right route for me? And I'm not demonizing franchising. I'm saying there's no easy opportunity out there. It requires us to do the research that is required, and not just desktop research. If you're interested in franchising, go in, like, let's make an example. I mean, I advise quite a few retired people who are running laundromats, who transition from their corporate jobs into owning like a laundromat. And one of the things that we found in that space was that even running a laundromat is not easy, because the employees will steal from you. So that means a lot of the time you must find yourself being at the business. Is that what you want? So those are some of the things that cause friction that I would like for you to really question for yourself. Is this what I want? Does it make sense? And is it a validated problem, right? And then map your institutional capital. Like, that is a big thing. Write down some of the biggest problems that you have solved, that you are very confident about, and think about how that could be commercialized from your perspective. And then talk to people. I think you're going to constantly see me over and over talking about talk to people. That's one of the de-risk ways of making sure that you are tapping into a business that makes sense. You will not understand it unless you're talking to people. So do not rely on desktop research. Do not rely on surveys. Talk to actual humans. They will help you a lot. And then validate. Once you've validated, and in validation, and you will see this when you go through our course, is that if when you get up in the morning, you are not crazy about this problem, like it doesn't make you angry or passionate, you're not obsessive about it, I would urge you to leave it alone, because you are the fire in the Drievoet. Remember, we spoke about the Drievoet, which is a pizza at the pot. Under the pot, there's a fire, and the fire is the entrepreneur. So if it's a problem that you are not obsessed about, especially once you've validated it, it's okay to walk away from it and go and look for something that is a bit easier. Like that, we cannot stress enough, and this will be shared. So I think I'll park my presentation here, and I'm more than happy to take questions or be guided as to what is next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Molefe. I appreciate your presentation, and from the responses, it was very well received. Just some highlights for me: the Drievoet, the three-legged pot: cash flow, customers, and compliance. You caution us about the tender trap. Although, to be honest, small businesses who provide catering to government departments also have to go through the tender process. So we just have to acknowledge that. I love the advice about don't touch your pension. I think everybody is looking towards the gratuity and taking a lump sum and jumping into some adventure. and your caution around that to leave the pension and look at solving problems with a view to making a difference. You're reminding us about the lean startup framework and also maybe the need for mentorship. So it is helpful to cultivate a ecosystem, a community that can support you as you navigate entrepreneurship. I love your statement that sleeping is a rumor. It's a nice to have if you're an entrepreneur. And for somebody running a business, paying attention to the finer details would require less sleep. What is important, I think, for our listening audience, while we are targeting people who are going into the retirement space, we are also mindful that current government employees, we are also mindful of every citizen listening into the program could benefit from what you have contributed. So if somebody has a business idea and is following your lean startup framework or is following the advice that you are given in preparation for their retirement, or as they move from one sphere of life to another sphere of life, they could use the skills that you have provided for us. So thank you very much for your input. Please hang around so that we can deal with the questions at the end. Thank you very much for that, colleagues. I would like to do a quick shout out to our principal, Ms. Bandile Mkwanazi, who has joined us. Thank you, Acting Principal, for connecting with us, and you also speak a little later to the partnership that we have with UJ. Our next speaker is Mr. Pila Sokela. He's going to speak on the foundational financial principles, financial literacy, entrepreneurial mindset, and business readiness. Let me introduce you to him. He's a conversationalist. He's known as Pila Sokela, not Pilasande Sokela. Pila Sokela. He's a conversationalist. He's a academic. He's an entrepreneur. He specializes in digital marketing strategy, small business development, digital transformation, and online brand positioning. With over a decade of experience in academic research, consulting, and entrepreneurship, he has established himself as a leading voice in the intersection of marketing and technology. Beyond academia, he's an accomplished writer, thought leader, having contributed to platforms such as IOL, Business Live, and BizCommunity. He is also the founder of content marketing consulting firm, helping township-based businesses leverage digital strategies for growth. Through his widely followed Facebook page, he continues to mentor young entrepreneurs, advocating for digital inclusion and sustainable business practices. Let us welcome you, Mr. Pila Sokela. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Louise. Can you guys hear me? Is my voice projecting well?
Yes, very clearly. Thank you very much.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you so much for that intro. I think whenever you say you're a conversationalist, people wonder what is that? I think in a very simple language is that I talk too much. So I get paid to speak. So whether it's paneling discussions like this one, or perhaps delivering keynotes. So I like to be in spaces where we impact thought leadership, where we contribute to conversation that shape mindset. I mean, my previous speaker, Mr. Selebogo, spoke quite a lot about the mindset shift that needs to take place. So my presentation today is about financial literacy, and I must declare or a disclaimer that this is not financial advice. This is what I've learned in the streets, right? And this is what I believe it works. And I will link, my presentation to what Selebogo has already covered. because it's got a lot to do with being out there in the streets and understanding what is happening on the ground, right? Rather than sitting in the classroom and reading about research that 95% of the time it generalizes, right? It's not really, it doesn't cover the nuances that really happen on the ground. So that's the academic element. So I am an academic, but also I'm a practitioner. So I do a lot of small business development, whether it be, how to enhance or how to build an online presence for your business, how to, build a content pipeline or a sales pipeline for your business. So I'm going to share my presentation, and look, it's going to be very generic, right? What I'm trying to highlight here is to make you aware of the realities of, what happens when somebody is approaching retirement. What are some of the behavioral elements that compound over time, right? And so that you understand that you will face these challenges. It's not a clear pathway. Okay, now we're approaching retirement, you're going to withdraw funds, whatever the case may be, going to cash out. Now, all of a sudden, there's going to be opportunities left, right, and center, which is not usually the case. And again, my presentation would link to an experience of my own mother, like Useleboko. Look, my mother was a financial clerk at a hospital for 25 years, right? And there are certain behaviors over time that led to, post-retirement, it became a bit of a challenge. So we had to retire her. We had to now take care of her, as we still do now, as we're supposed to. But there's a lot of behaviors that over time, they led to issues like, you are now over indebted. When you retire, you have to now first settle the historical debt before you can start thinking of opportunities, which is, we're not trying to be in that position. So hopefully you can take down some few notes. And again, we can engage on this topic, because, when it comes to talking about money, it becomes an emotional topic. People don't want to open up, right? They'll tell you, no, I'm thinking I'm going to invest in Bitcoin. And then you ask them, okay, so what's your strategy for Bitcoin? Yeah, no, Bitcoin, you can multiply times 10 because Bitcoin is growing. The person doesn't have full knowledge. They just hear what these speakers talk about on the internet, and then they think, you know what, I'm going to make money very quickly, which is another disease that we face, as South Africans, or in fact, as people, this thing of short-termism, right? You want money now. You want to make as quick money as quick as possible, right? And somewhere along the line, you get scammed. And you face all these sorts of cyber crimes where they either take your identity to go and open up accounts and loans, which all of that is a result of short-termism, wanting to make money quickly, trying things like sports betting. It's crippling our society, and a lot of people are not aware of this happening, right? People are struggling to make a living because they spend most of their money in gambling. The gambling industry is growing exponentially. I think it's about a 30 billion plus industry, and it's a problem. One of the Pick n Pay or Ackerman CEO spoke about this pandemic that we are facing as an economy, where people are struggling to make ends meet. But then here's this thing now that is promising, wealth for people, and then people end up losing anyway. All right. So let me get straight to my presentation. I've also been allocated 30 minutes, but I think obviously the conversation will continue offline. It continues on my social media platforms, very active on LinkedIn. So colleagues, the idea, or what I'm hoping to achieve by the end of this presentation, is that there will be a mindset shift from a retirement risk to building some sort of financial resilience, or building some sort of financial model, right? To say, will you be able to survive 20 years or 30 years post-retirement? And maybe this is the question I'd like to pose first as a start, right? We do need a reality check And I love that Seleboge has covered some of the key elements that you'll see also threading in this presentation. So things like, are you prepared to live 25 to 30 years without an income? One might think, I've got a couple of millions in my retirement. I'll certainly live 8 years with those millions. But here's the reality. Inflation is your biggest problem. What you can afford now with that million or whatever millions you will not be able to afford that in 10 years' time because of inflation, right? Also, another issue that we have is cash flow, the ability to manage and handle the money post-retirement, even pre-retirement. A lot of people don't understand the importance of cash flow. How are you spending money in relation to money that you're making? A lot of people don't have a cash flow plan. And they also fail to understand the banking system and how it operates, right? So I have a couple of properties in the township. I'm currently in a property that I'm converting into bedrooms, right, for rental. So I've also got a few flatlets that I'm renting in and around town, of which when it started, in my mind, I was not doing some kind of property investment portfolio. I just understood that, one of the ways which you can build your wealth is through property, right? So you buy the first property as I want to live there, but you soon realize that, oh, crap, what did I get myself into? Now you've got all these issues of maintaining the property, there's levies that go up all the time. You have to buy electricity, the tariff is almost at 50%, whatever. So there's all these issues that come through when you realize later to say, you know what, there needs to be a better way of managing the money, right? After a big financial commitment. So you start researching. You do a bit of desktop research, as Seleboge mentioned earlier on, but also you balance that with going out there and attending property investment seminars where people that have walked the same path will share insights. But also it's about being in the vicinity of people that are or think like you or want to be like you. Because when you share what you want to do or what you aspire to achieve, they will then tell you how they got through whatever challenges that you're facing at early stages, right? So one of the concepts that I learned in that process is cash flow, meaning that banks only understand the movement of money, right? What do I mean by that? When you save money, your biggest challenge or your biggest setback will be inflation, right? And also the growth in terms of the interest that banks give you is not the same as what you would get if you invest in, when money moves or in the financial markets or even in property. So I understood the concept of cash flow to say, it's not about how much money is in the bank account. It's about how much or how do you move your money, right? Because the bank looks at that to say, if this person has this property, but then they are renting out this property and they have access to this kind of money, it means this person is not a risk, right? We can borrow this person money because they have access. Because banks they always look at who's got money to spend. So now what you realize in things like property investment or property development is that it compounds over time, right? Meaning if I buy one property today, and then that property is for investment purposes, meaning I'm going to rent it out and then over time improve the quality of the property. You will see that also improves, how much you can sell that property, and then also how much, if you're doing rentals, how much you can charge. Now, with that, you realize that within 2 years of financial discipline, where you don't spend over what you can afford, you spend less, and you try and limit yourself and play what I like to call a long-term game, not a short-term game where, all right, I'm going to have one property here, next one there, and then I'm going to do this. And no. You stand with that one property and you try and build a solid financial model around that before you move on to the next one. And you build financial discipline for yourself as well. Because another thing we cannot ignore is self-discipline. Some people, at the moment they see money, I need to go and spend. So again, a long-term gain increases the financial pressure because you want these short-term things, but then you also want to achieve long-term wealth. So it's about trying to find a balance in it. So in 2 years, I was able to buy my second property because I had access to cash flow, meaning there was money from one rental flatlet, which then obviously you get, whatever gigs here and there, consulting, you go and speak, and then also, you're working, you're employed, so there's money coming in. So you find ways of making, an income or making a living, which then you need to reinvest back into your property portfolio, right? So from property number 2, moving forward, your dynamic now changes because obviously now you're dealing with 2 people that are living in your properties, where now you need to have someone that maintains those property. So you start involving property estate companies or somebody that deals with that business because you are working. You've got your family to take care of. You've got all these things that are moving. Now you need assistance. You need someone that understands, that can help you to then multiply and build that portfolio for you. So then I got services of a property management company, where then now if a tenant wants to leave, which happens most of the times due to whatever unforeseen circumstances, so they struggle to make a payment or meet their monthly financial commitments. So you now have someone or a company that deals with it, that will handle if someone is not paying, and that will make sure that month end or year end they can show you how much you made and what are the expenses that you had to deal with. And then they also help you with accumulating more properties. So that's just I'm not a property expert, but because I understand the long-term game and using property as a vehicle to build wealth, because at the end of the day, this property is an appreciating asset, right? Especially if you don't live in the property. Because when you live in the house, it means now you are facing all of those expenses, including a bond repayment, is not helping you to build wealth. Okay, so the question that I want you to have in mind, and I'll just go through some insights in terms of what's happening, and then some financial modeling that you need to have in place, and then maybe take up some questions. So the question that I want you to, in your mind, at the back of your mind, is to think about your preparation for retirement, to say, would you be financially stable or sustainable post-retirement going 25 to 30 years? Because the life expectancy, is that you're going to live, but on average, you live until you're 65 to 69, around there. And then, you die, because eventually we're all going to die, right? So now, are you financially prepared to last that time frame before death, of course? And I know I speak of death as something, but the reality is that it's going to happen eventually. So park this thought at the back of your mind, and maybe we can discuss a little bit later on. So what are some of the reality elements when it comes to people going for retirement or post-retirement? Is that, number one, people are worried that they are being paid less, right? And it's a reality of the current economy. And I want to say Ramaphosa's economy, but I know that, it's a debate, it's a political debate. But the reality is a lot of people are being paid less. So you almost need to have an income supplement, right? For example, I learned most of my business, way of doing business from my own mother, right? Who at the point when I was busy in high school, going into varsity, she sold almost everything you can think about. Tupperware, leather jackets, jewelry, all of those things were really about trying to balance the income in the household, because I lost my dad in the year 2000. And at home, it's myself and I have 3 siblings. All of us are guys, or it's brothers. We don't have a sister. So she literally had to take care of us. So now that meant she needed to, find means to make money somewhere else. because obviously the salary was not sufficient. So more than half of people approaching retirement, they face this stressing element. And then also post-retirement, a lot of people, they run out of money before they even reach a point of, God has decided otherwise. And then also in terms of savings, a lot of people don't have savings. And there are people out there that really don't have money to save, right? And then you can't save if you don't have additional income, money, or somewhere where you make extra money. But you need to build that financial model. It doesn't happen automatically. Okay. Now, again, we have a systematic problem, which again, it comes from traditional or some of the political or apartheid-related regimes. So we do have a system that somehow is crippling us. Because tell me why we introducing a two-pot system, and now I'm thinking of what Seboba was mentioning about the 3-foot, right? A two-pot system that allows you to withdraw half of your or some of your money, and then now you are left with little to retire with. And when you look at the statistics, I'll share in the next slide, almost 600 billion was withdrawn in 2024. Can you imagine how many people withdrew from their retirement because of that? That's also crippling us, guys. And then again, tell me why some organizations they introduce pay me now systems, meaning you can withdraw your salary before month end. You see, there's also a systematic issue that is failing us. And then there's also things that now you fall gullible to things like having to go to Mashonisa. So which now you become in this debt cycle where pay me now, and then Mashonisa, and then you have to borrow from friends every single month. It's hand to mouth. You can't make a living. What we're talking about here, you won't be able to achieve it if you're in that cycle. And it's a very difficult cycle to get out of. If you're not in that cycle yet, I will encourage you to not even start. Okay? Now, as mentioned, so some of these behaviors that lead people to short-termism or borrowing money, short-term loans and all of that. And you'll see when almost at the end of my presentation, how this becomes a compounding behavior. 10 years later, that loan from Mashonisa that you took 10 years before now is crippling you at the end, because now you're retiring, you're cashing out, you have to go back and pay that money, or you have to go back and pay whatever debtors or whoever you own. So there's an issue of high debt. People are experiencing debt, they retire or they withdraw early. There's also short-term decisions. Oh, my daughter, I want to give or my son, I want to give them best 21st birthday party. You go and spend 100,000 or 50,000, and then that is an emotional spend. It's not a logical spend, right? In as much as you'd love to do that and you'd love to achieve that, but logically, it won't make sense, because 10 years down the line, that 100K, if you'd invested that 100K, you'd probably get 50,000 Rand on top of that. 5 years interest of plus minus 3%. But that's not what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to caution about is current behaviors will predict future outcomes. And that's the kind of thinking when it comes to retirement. So again, not going to report these statistics, but this is sort of what's happening, right? There's over 4.5 trillion assets that are managed by different companies across the financial system, right? The problem is that people undersave and they don't plan for retirement. So the system, in as much as it cripples those who are, short-term oriented, for those who are thinking long-term or thinking longevity, it works, because if you invest today or you spend wisely today, it'll save you tomorrow. Okay, so there's a lot of information around this in the ASISA report, or the Association for Savings and Investment report in South Africa. But what is important as well for you guys, I know most of you will probably not be in academia, but you need to understand these things, or read about these things at least, to understand, how do you then maneuver? Because otherwise you'll go in blind, and then someone will promise you and tell you, you know what, you need to trade Forex. And then they're going to ask you to come and pay 5K to go and eat a nice croissant in Sente. And then at the end of the day, you sit there on your screen, you try and trade, you lose 100K in 30 minutes. And then you go into further debt, right? And then it becomes a cycle. Understand how money works and how money moves. So this is why some of the reasons why retirement fails. And I know I'm running out of time, colleagues. Just going to run through these last couple of slides. So not understanding how money works leads to poor financial behavior, which then ultimately becomes a problem when you retire. This is the compounding effect I was talking about. If you're not educating yourself about financial literacy, as we are doing today, you will make poor financial decisions. I've made those decisions before, and I learned from that. That's why I said it's from the streets. It's not from I worked in the financial services as a financial advisor, but it's decisions that I made, money that I spent, that ultimately, was lost because of not understanding financial literacy. So this becomes a compounding effect. Okay. So what are the financial principles? So this is also a summation to what I was talking about earlier, to say a longevity plan. A decision you make today, literally today is payday for some people, or well, tomorrow. The decision that you will make with your money tomorrow can impact what will happen in 6 months, what will happen in the next year, or 5 years, or 10 years for that matter. It's also about understanding the compounding value of the decision, and also for the financial decisions as well. Because if you save today, or if you put money into a financial instrument to buy shares or whatever the case may be, in 6 months, you might not see any benefit because the financial markets are not stable, right? But if you play the long-term game, in 10 years' time, you will reap the rewards of what decisions or financial decisions that you make today. Inflation is your biggest problem. Now, I see a lot of people talk about, you know what, you need to save more money. Saving is good, right? Because it helps you during the rainy days. But it can't be the only vehicle that you think is going to build wealth for you. Because why? Inflation is your problem. Inflation, looking at how much you save versus the interest that you get out of that versus the inflation, there's an offset there. Okay, cash flow, understanding cash flow. I think a lot of people month end don't print out their bank statement, whether it's your personal bank statement or your business bank account. Print that and look at your bad behavior, because they are there, and have an honest conversation to say, how is your money moving? Because there's a reason why banks will not give you money. Because again, the system, it requires, certain things to be in place. That's why we have credit scoring. If you have a credit score, you have to have a good credit score to get money, but then that money must be spent on an asset or something that can create wealth over time. Right? And then also diversifying. Now, diversifying means, for an example, so I did speak about the fact that, I have a few properties, but that's not the only business I'm hoping that it will create wealth for my kids 20, 30 years from now. But essentially, there's also consulting wing, where I do a lot of consulting to business schools. I do consulting to small businesses. There's also an element where I do build systems and automate marketing systems for businesses, so that it helps you as you run the business one-man show. You can have automated emails that are able to regenerate an invoice if the email is stating invoice, and then it resends it to a client, and then that whole system. So I make money out of that. Also, you make money out of online selling. A lot of young people, and I know probably this conversation might not necessarily be an easy one for someone who's older and, these online things are not making sense, but it's worthy of pursuing because you learn that young people are making money without owning things. So there's a concept called drop shipping. Drop shipping is literally finding a supplier, building a platform, and then selling to a consumer, right? In that process, you put all your markups. This is the exact same business model that your Takealots of this world are running. They're not creating items or manufacturing things. They find suppliers, build a platform. Their job is to promote that platform so that it has traffic. And then they take the traffic and go and sell it to suppliers. And then when the suppliers want to sell on this platform, they charge them a fee, which is called a fulfillment fee. That business model replicates drop shipping. So young people are making money out of that. Where they go to China, go and find suppliers, they buy things there, and then they bring it back to South Africa to sell them. Also, some they even buy locally, and then they sell on this platform. So you look at options to diversify your investments. Now, here's an option that I think you can look at, a 3-bucket strategy. So most South Africans have the security element, which involves, your savings, pension, blah, 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 blah. But now you need to look at what are your growth engines? What is your income? How are you diversifying your income options? Running a business, starting a business if you don't have one already. What assets do you have? Okay, so as you can see, the income bucket in this illustration is bigger than the security bucket because that's where wealth comes from. Right now, this model, if you look at it from a framework perspective, you must look at what is your fixed income. Right. So now, if you have a fixed income, in this case, it would probably be your salary. Now, how do you change that to have flexible earnings? Meaning there's income, which is fixed, and then here and there you do consulting because you're at an age where you've built a lot of wisdom, a lot of expertise in a particular field or area, where now if you plow back into the community, people are looking for that knowledge. So you start charging for that. So, and then you move from traditional employment of saying, I've retired, I'm going to make a U-turn and go back and look for a job, to have a more flexible approach. Now, because I'm also employed by the Johannesburg Business School, I was going to share, excuse me, what I've picked up from consulting, where a lot of people are making money out of doing this consulting thing, where a person can, literally invoice 200K in a day, and they're sitting at home reading news. 200,000 Rand a day from just reading traffic or reading news or whatever the case may be. So they make money out of that. They do interviews, people in HR. They are employed by the very same sector to be a consultant to find talent. And they do that at the comfort of their home. You go for an interview going into someone's house in Northcliffe. So you need to start opening your mind to all these possibilities. Right. Now, I'm not going to touch too much on this because I think throughout the presentation, colleagues, you would have picked up that most of what I talked about is about, the mindset, right? Changing the way you think or you view money. What opportunities exist within your immediate surroundings? If you are based in a central business district or CBD, where there's a lot of people moving, commuting, going to work, the business opportunity there won't be the same as someone who coming from a Kuruman or, whatever rural urban place, or Ekasi, which is far from, central business district or hubs like Johannesburg, for example. So someone who lives in Johannesburg, the opportunity is in, you need to have some kind of property because people are looking for job opportunities. They want to rent. They need places to live. So definitely you will win with property. But if you are from KZN like myself, from Ladysmith, and you have the same property business, it won't be the same. Even though it's good, but it won't be the same as having something similar in Johannesburg. Because if you compare, like for example, in Gauteng, property business, you do room rentals, you get 4,000-5,000 rand in a certain area, and then in another area, one room will cost about 500 rands. So you weigh those opportunities, and also adapting, right? Understanding the world that we're living in now is not the same as what you used to have 25 years ago, 30 years ago. There's a lot of digital aspect to business, or to opportunities, or to income diversification. If you don't know how online operates, unfortunately, the time is finished. I would have taken you through, step by step. But if you don't know anything about doing money or making money online, follow me on LinkedIn. But also, YouTube is your biggest source. Go on YouTube, search income diversification opportunities in a specific sector that you are familiar or have expertise in. It's not about having a PhD in property development so that you can be a property investor. You can literally read and attend conferences and be in spaces where you are likely to find luck. Because luck doesn't come out of you building a business in the back room, right? It's when you are out there and people can see you and you meet people and you talk, you network, you build contacts. And then also value creation. I think what is more important is what value do you bring in society? And I know program director, you have cut me. I do apologize. I was just, flowing. But look, just to conclude, I think it's really about having a long-term view of, what will happen post-retirement rather than how can you make money quickly. Thank you so much, and I'm happy to take questions and engage with colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sokela, and thank you for respecting our time boundary. We want to make sure that all our speakers have enough time and give our guests an overview of the program. So I want to also appreciate your personal experience that you have shared with us in the property space. You warn us about being scammed and how pensioners or would-be pensioners are at risk, and how your presentation is helping us to build a strength from risk to financial resilience. What I think is a leading point for me is around the cash flow plan, and even in your retirement is to be familiar with the cash flow plan. In the level of preparation for it is also to have the long-term view, maybe 25 to 30 years post the retirement date. I also love the idea that you gave us ideas for potential activities that we could take into the retirement. Thank you for sharing the 3-bucket strategy. I thought that was quite useful, and as well the link to YouTube that we could do some additional learning for ourselves. Thank you very much, Mr. Sokela. Dear guests, participants, we are taking your questions on the platform. Please be aware that we are making the videos available via YouTube, the NSG YouTube. It will also be available via LinkedIn as a link, and the presentations, if available from our guest speakers, we will also make that available to you. So thank you very much for your input, Mr. Sokela. I was quite enraptured by it. Our next speaker is Dr. Senzo Ngcobo. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He's a strategic leader educator. He's an ethics specialist. His entrepreneurial education are his focus areas. Has two decades of leadership experience across both the private and public sector. He brings an integrated perspective that blends strategic leadership, ethical governance, and academic excellence. His professional foundation was established in marketing management and strategic management, where he developed a strong command of strategic decision-making, organizational performance, and entrepreneurial education. He's also completed a PhD research paper exploring the link between organizational performance pressures and ethical leadership. Dr. Mbobo is going to speak to us about advanced financial analysis, including cost, volume, profit analysis, budgeting systems, variance analysis, as well as forecasting. Dr. Mbobo, over to you, sir. We can see your presentation. Thank you.
I've been trying to set it up. A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for the invite and me sharing some of my experiences with you. Thank you for the opportunity. So I'm in the business of talking as well. I talk too much. So the moderator probably just give me around 5 minutes to 7 minutes. Give me a shout out in terms of if I'm a little bit behind. I've got plus minus 10 slides, but I'll try to make sure that I'm within time. So, ladies and gentlemen, my section basically is about advanced financial analysis. The theme around my conversations is around financial intelligence for sustainable retirement ventures. So that is basically where I'm going to situate my conversation on. So, but before I get into this particular conversation, I just want to give a shout out to Mr. Molefe as well as Sokhele around mainly two things that I picked up from them. So there is this particular concept of the paradigm shift of in the entrepreneurial sector, where we are saying, can we move away from selling products, right, to selling solutions? And Mr. Molefe actually highlighted that, perfectly well. Because when you are selling solutions, basically people buy solutions. They do not necessarily buy products just for the sake of I just want to have a car. They want to move from point A to point B. That is basically a new paradigm that we need to, transfer to entrepreneurial education. Mr. Sokhele, when he spoke about his personal experiences, around property, around the importance of cash flow, that was very eye-opening, and I really appreciated that particular conversation, the issue of the aspect of the change in mindset and stuff like that. So, as an educator, we normally start with the learning objective. So what is the objective of this particular session? The core problem is that retirees start businesses without having to know certain things, right? One of which is the fact that if you choose a venture, what should you do? So for instance, because you are going to use a small portion of your retirement, which is very wise. Many people have actually touched on this thing that you don't use your your retirement money, because that's basically you're playing with trouble there. So the criteria for choosing any venture, if time allows, I'll provide you with some few examples of ventures probably that you'd actually look into. So the criteria is quite simple. If you want to get into any venture, the conversation to retirees would be low capital intensive businesses, fast cash cycles, anything that has essential demand. That's what you need to get into, because you are not necessarily innovating, creating things. You want to make sure that there is this particular fast cash cycles, and you need to develop organizations with simple operations, limited dependency on these complicated business models and complicated technology. So that is the first thing that I think we need to look into. So the conversation from my side is looking into advanced financial analysis. In fact, the fact that we use the word advanced is not, it's mainly because of the brief. It's financial analysis, understanding the aspect of cost structures, understanding, knowing how much we must sell to be able to survive, knowing how much we must sell to be able to grow, and all of those things. And the biggest conversation that I'm going to be having with you now is the issue of managing cash flow. This is where the wheels just come off, right? Particularly in terms of getting into financial analysis and all of those things, tracking performance against the expectations. But the essence of it is that when everything is said and done, we need to be able to understand that when we retire, sometimes we get into these difficult financial situations where our income is it's not stable, because it's not a salary anymore, and it is affected by the investment strategies that we have chosen, the issue of capital erosion, particularly if you live longer than, so when you are young, you are looking forward to living long, but when you are old, it's a different conversation, because if you live too long, you are going to, exhaust your pension situation. So therefore, we then tend to get into business, and those businesses, the fly-by-night businesses, they then fail as a result of that. So knowing what we know now in terms of the issues that we talk about, I think now we need to, I start, with this particular quote. There is this wonderful, CEO from GM CEO. So one of the things that he highlighted, he said, if it was him, organizational performance, firm's performance, entrepreneurial performance would be measured by mainly three things. It would be measured by customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and cash flow. So the cash flow part, this is basically where I situate my conversation, right? So it's quite important that when I look into all of these things, it talks to this financial analysis part. And the way in which I'm going to present this particular session, I'm going to be as brief as possible in terms of mainly 5 disciplines, particularly if you understand that the measure of any financial success of any entrepreneurial and any business for that matter is that the measure is profitability, the measure is greater efficiency, the measure is outcompeting your competitors, the measure is growing. Firstly is to survive and then grow. So when you are actually looking into all of those measures, now you need to understand that you have to come up with or develop a survival tool for you to be able to achieve all of those financial positions. So I'm going to touch on financial analysis. right? I'm going to touch on cost, volume, profit. I'm going to touch on budgeting. I'm going to touch on variances and forecasting. So I'll try to be as practical as possible so that you are able to understand in a nutshell that whenever you are you are starting a business, please make it a point that you start from the first conversation that I had with you, I'm having with you, that actually says that whatever that you choose a business that has a recurring demand, choose a business that has a low capital intensity. So therefore, it is primary for you to be able to effectively use these instruments for you to be able to survive and move forward without having to mess up your retirement annuity. So now let me touch on these few things. Financial analysis, at the core of it, is you are actually interpreting your financial positions. So I make an assumption that probably you would have you understand financial statement of financial performance, statement of financial position, cash flow, statement of change in equity. I take it probably there would be an introductory part that looks into that. So the essence of you being successful would then be the interpretation of those financial performance metrics. It's basically understanding the profit drivers, understand the cost leakages within your business. So when we're talking about all of these things, we are mainly talking about whether are we able to understand how profit is structured. Where do we get into the conversation around the conversation around break-even point and all of those aspects, right? So the impact that we just want to look into, particularly in terms of this particular section, is that we need to shape our decision. We need to make our decision. These decisions must be factually based. This decision, we need to move towards data-driven decisions rather than emotions. So, ladies and gentlemen, in the business, small business, whether big business, small business, it does not matter. The quality of the decisions that we make are as a result of good information. The quality of the results are as a result of good information. So we are going to be looking into trying to collate this financial information, arrange it, and present it in such a way that we improve our decision-making ability, particularly in terms of, financial statements and all of these wonderful things that we normally talk about, and everything that is aligned to the business model. So the next point is this. The critical question, there's a concept, for instance, which is called cost volume profit analysis. The essence of that is that we just want to define the line between sustainability and failure, right? There's a concept called, break-even point, where the organization runs, right? They are not making profit, they are not making a loss. So when you are starting to run entrepreneurial business, small businesses, you need to be able to understand how do you arrive there. That is basically the starting point. How do you arrive there, right? Where you are not necessarily making profit, you are not necessarily making, and so that you are able to plan in terms of expansion and growth and sustainability, but we need to start there. There's also a concept called contribution margin. So contribution margins, it's a little bit, high level concept whereby there are things or there are products and services that you sell within your operations, but they do not necessarily make that much money. How they are quite important in terms of running the business, in terms of paying for utility, in terms of paying salaries, in terms of paying all of these things. right? So contribution margin basically also look into how do we structure that so that we are able to position ourselves into financial planning. So, you know, when we're talking about this particular concept of it, it's one of the most important, you know, conversation. But I want you to situate this conversation within the context of new businesses, developing businesses, starting businesses. I know that sometimes we tend to use these big words, and you know, some people get a little bit off because of using these big words. But the essence, I just want to mention the essence, because the essence is for us to be able to assist you in terms of defining the line between sustainability and failure. And what are the causes of you failing in business? What are the causes of you sustaining your businesses? So that is basically what cost volume analysis is all about, right? So the next point that I also want to touch on quickly is this point of budgeting systems. So budgeting is one of the areas that actually assist us in entrepreneurial financial planning, right? We need to develop and design budgets that are going to be able to that we are going to be able to evaluate performance. When we should not necessarily wait up until the year end, but when we are, you know, putting this budget, we need to be saying, you know, I want to sell so much, right? I want to sell, you know, 100,000 of this bottled water. However, if it's I'm going to be doing this thing over a period of 12 months, how do I then monitor my progress? I know that by, you know, say by October, say by March, I need to have sold 25. By June, I need to have sold, you know, 50. By September, I need to have sold 75. So that actually assists in terms of understanding the progress around your budgeting. So now, why is it so critical that we look into this conversation? We look into this conversation because if, for instance, you are not budgeting, the money disappears silently. We know our own personal experiences. You get, particularly those guys that are still working, you have a salary and you plan, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do that. When the money hits your bank account, now other things show up, and then all hell break loose because you are not necessarily sticking to your budget. So budget is a form of a disciplinary process in financial terms. So we look into that. So I don't know whether you still remember now when I said to you, Jack Welch spoke about mainly three things, and those three things, and he mentioned that you know, the success of any business is determined by customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and cash flow. So cash flow, ladies and gentlemen, that's where the majority of businesses get it wrong. Because if, for instance, you are unable to pay your trade creditors are going to go to the court and stop your businesses, right? So I'm saying to you, you need to be able to understand cash flow statements, where you are now looking into the actual cash that is coming to the organization and the actual cash that is going out of the organization, and you need to be able to understand that you always have to have a positive balance when it comes to that. So it's one of those nice you know, nice programs that we normally run when we do cash flow statement and the analysis of cash flow statement. What are the cost implications that actually drain your revenues? What are the things that actually shoot up cost? And then what I like about these cash flow, it does not necessarily look into things that we are supposed to be getting, things that we are supposed to be spending on. It is looking at the reality of the inflows and the outflows of cash, which is many people get into trouble mainly because they are looking into the value of the organization. So the market capitalization of the organization is 1 million, right? But this particular 1 million is into building, is into shares, is into all of these things. You are unable now to take advantage of opportunities that are current, that are coming out. So because of your inability to manage your cash flow. So that is basically the conversation there. And then the essence of planning spending, making sure that there are contingency conversations that we need to get into when it comes to financial planning, because not everything goes according to plan. What if? So I'm going to touch a little bit on scenario planning. What if types of plans. So remember, this particular section it's all about understanding the financial analysis, understanding the information that is coming from financial statements, statement of financial position, statement of financial performance, cash flow, statement of equity. So we need to be able to understand from that particular point of view. So the biggest part, or the impact part when it comes to budgeting system, is the issue around stability that actually replaces guesswork. So the issue of guesswork, in fact, Molefe mentioned this and say desktop research is not sufficient, right? You need to go out there and talk to people in terms of the needs that the things that they are looking for. The thing, without having to just sit down and make assumptions and become too excited by yourself in your desk, you need to really ask good questions for you to be able to reduce the issues of guesswork and all of those, evils around improper budgeting system. And now there is this issue of variance. So variance analysis is as a result of this. We plan to do things in the financial world, and then we do them. So those are two different dimensions. When we are planning, it's a very exciting time. It's very conceptual, and when we're talking about the fact that now all of your plans, are you able to realize your plans? Now you find out that what planning, you did not consider certain external and internal variables. Your plans were not necessarily founded on facts and driven by, by data, and all of a sudden things actually fall apart. So the issue of variances, they give us early warning that we are not necessarily moving in the right direction, right? We need to continuously compare planned versus actual performance. We need to look into trying to identify revenue and cost deviations. We need to be able to enable corrective action. So when we are taking the cap of being entrepreneurs, the cap of owning small businesses, we are now getting into managerial, space where we need to manage this. Our responsibility now is to manage these, variances. And I know that one would actually say, please note that whenever we're talking about variances, it's basically deviations. There are acceptable deviations, there are unacceptable deviations. So there are standard deviations, which are normally acceptable, a little bit up, a little bit down, depending on the financial policy of the organization. So we need to be able to understand that. We need to understand that we need to catch problems before they escalate. So variance analysis assist small businesses, assist entrepreneurial businesses to be able to sit down and reflect and say, is it possible to make sure that we do not actually wait up until we get into deeper problems? So we need to continuously, continuously develop as we move along, right? So it's quite important for us to be able to understand this conversation. And finally, just before before I wrap up, ladies and gentlemen, is the issue of forecasting. So forecasting, once again, it should not be a guesswork. It should not something that we thumbs up. So our responsibility as entrepreneurs is to continuously look into trends, continuously look into, certain economic variables, is looking into industry variables. Am I in the industry that is growing? Am I in the industry that is actually declining? What informed the buying behavior of my customers? What are the level of their disposable income? What actually determine their customer behavior? And you look into all of those things, and you are now able to predict with precision in terms of aligning the demand and what you are going to be producing. So forecasting, it looks into revenue projections based on facts around the trends, based on facts around other industries that are doing the same thing, based on the fact of whether the market is growing or whether the market or the industry that I'm in is declining. So we also look into the issues of cost forecasting, scenario planning. So scenario planning is one of those activities in financial terms that now talks about the real social issues. What if? We normally call it what if planning aspect. So we put certain variables. Say, for instance, in big organization, they would actually say, we don't allow the CEO, the CFO, and the co to be in the same plane if they are moving from one city to the next. To mitigate that particular thing, they will actually do scenario planning. What if this plane, with all of these people all at once crashes? Then it creates havoc, particularly in terms of taking the organization forward. So it's a scenario planning basically looks into the revenue, into the cost around whatever that you want to achieve. So the essence now is to shift from reactive to strategic financial control. So if you understand strategy, normally we say, don't look at an organization as what it is, but look at an organization as what it should become. So we normally assist students in terms of developing that particular mindset, as far as financial positions are. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to touch on this thing. Before, I think I've got 5 minutes left. So the issue is that let's move away from this particular aspect. Remember that you are retiring. And the fact that you are retiring does not necessarily mean that the cost stops. The cost continue. You are still required to pay electricity. You are still required to pay your water, your bills, your utility, and all of these things. You are still into this. So what happened is that there is a limitation amount of money that you can now use because you are not necessarily getting the full salary and all of those things. So there must be, you need to be at a position that you have some sort of tools that you need to create to understand your financial position. So financial clarity is quite important. Your projections in terms of the amount of money that you have, you don't ever use your money, your entire money on business ventures, your retirement money on business ventures. Stick to low capital intensive, types of ventures, right? Understand the issues of operational control. So operational control, you control your finances, control your assets, control if, for instance, you have people that are working for you, do management performance on them, control your processes, control your quality, do all of those things. You look into the issue of predictable income. So predictable income should always be informed by facts, by data, by information, right? That the way, this is the amount of money that could actually make me to live comfortably. Can I then identify an organization that would actually look into that? And then you need to move from uncertainty to control. So uncertainty is a place whereby you are not necessarily in control. It's mostly external. So we are dealing with external variables. So now when we're talking about control, it's when you identify the factors that could negatively or positively affect your ventures, and all of the things that you are weak in, try to do something about them. All of the things that you are good at, try to amplify that. So it's quite important. And the final question, before probably I give you some of the ventures that one can actually get into, is that if once again, I'm repeating this thing, if the income stop tomorrow, would you know why? So that is basically the essence of the financial understanding. And your financial understanding starts with you as an individual. And then when you transition a better understanding, when you transition that particular your knowledge, then you transition it to your ventures. So it's quite important. So Kele, Mr. Molefe mentioned a number of different ventures as I close, a number of different ventures, that one can actually get into. So they are not necessarily limited to this. They're not necessarily limited to this. But let me just wrap up, because I know that my time is up. Ladies and gentlemen, that was it for my section. I don't know whether there are any other questions. Louise, you can actually take.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Tobo. What a wonderful presentation. As you were going through your presentation, I thought about working on the business or working in the business. And so you were helping us to think about working on the business, having a long-term view, be able to make forecasting, be able to make predictions. You also raised the concern about product versus solutions. For small business entrepreneurs, it's really about food on the table. So they might be attracted to a product as income generation, where somebody who's a little bit more stable might focus on driving solutions.
Thank you.
I like the idea of recurring demand with low capital intensity. So you have a steady business model. Low capital intensity means you don't touch your pension gratuity. You don't touch what is your daily operating costs, but you are responding to a recurring demand. For all the presenters today, I hear the highlights on cash flow, and for myself, I'm taking that lesson quite seriously. You also raise, Doc, the issue of the contingency. What happens if things don't go well? What happens if you're caught in a scam? What happens if some things go wrong? How do you build contingencies into your business? So our dear guests, ladies and gentlemen and participants, this is the input from our input makers. Thank you for the excellent questions that are being posed on our Q&A session. Just to let you know, the presentation, the actual webinar is available on YouTube. And if you would like to listen to it again and pick up some of the wisdom that has come from our speakers, that will be awesome. Mr. Molefe has had to leave us, but if there are any questions related to his presentation, we have Ms. Holly Kaba, who will also be doing a short input for us. We at the National School of Government, in partnership with the University of Johannesburg, are bringing this program to you with a view of building capacity for those who will be leaving the public service. One of the key questions was, is this just for senior managers? No, it's for anybody that is leaving the public service onto their next phase of life. The program that we are talking about is 13 modules. It is offered at the University of Johannesburg. And so I'm going to ask Holly, please just to explain to us how to access this particular program, what are the requirements and the criteria, and as well how to think about the plan for attending this particular course. Holly, please, over to you.
Thank you, Miss Louise. Okay, it's still morning. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Holly. I work as a project coordinator for the Center of Entrepreneurship at the University of Johannesburg, located at the Johannesburg Business School campus. So the overall program I can give about this part or section is that this is the entrepreneurial program. Currently, it has not been open as yet, but with the requirement, you are required, we do not need youngsters, anyone below 20, it's still new. We need early retirement, approaching retirement applicants, and everything will be shared on the portal that you had used to join the link once everything has been approved from both the NSG and as well as with JBS. So the requirement criteria, it's strictly anyone. You don't have to have a business. If you do have a business, you are also welcome, but there is no limitation to the required business or entrepreneurs that venture into business, because we offer skills and knowledge to help you tackle the everyday challenges. Just like Mr. Molife and Mr. Pila mentioned, is that business exists, but we just offer you the solution. Someone asked on mentorship. We do not have a mentorship program alone, but with this program, we do offer mentorship at the end of enrollment. This will be after you have completed the program as is. And with anything related, I'm also just browsing through questions. Answered questions. The sessions are conducted virtually, but participants are also allowed to come on campus with booked sessions, because I understand other people may have struggles with network and internet connection. So the Johannesburg Business School does have rooms available for you to just join the session and just be part of it. If perhaps the sessions are contact, it would need participants to be close at Johannesburg, Gauteng, so that it would be easy for transportation. But otherwise, this is strictly an online program for conveniency. And with regards to time and how everything is facilitated, after onboarding and allowing everyone to just be onboarded for the program, there is a project scope that is shared with everyone with expectations of how attendance is made. It is not heavy. Once a week is required. And depending on time, we do facilitate programs on the afternoon, or it can be after 4, because we understand that people are working. It's a 4-hour session. But if participants voted that 4 hours is long, people have commitments at home, it can be a 2-hour session after work for 2 days in a week. But if it's a 4-hour session once a week, it can be during the day or after working hours, or even sometimes on Saturdays. We do not do classes on Sundays and public holidays. Are there any other questions that I left up with covering the scope? Miss Louise, I do apologize if I was fast. I'm also just browsing through questions.
No, maybe just about the eligibility. So it's around anybody that's approaching retirement age, either in retirement already recently, or somebody who is approaching retirement with a year or 2 to go. Matric, do they need matric? What qualifications do they need?
Yes, they do need matric. With any other qualifications, you can have a PhD. We do need the matric certificates to onboard you. So the requirement does include matric, and it would also just depend on the scope, because we have candidates interested in small business enrichment program that does not need matric, but strictly to entrepreneurship and just venturing into skills and knowledge development programs, we do need the candidate's matric certificate.
Great stuff.
Thank you.
Do they need data and because this is an online program,
Yes.
what kind of access do they need in terms of the systems?
Okay, so with facilitating the programs, we facilitate them using Teams. There is Teams that allows participants to receive the recorded session. We do not provide any internet funds. So there is no finance covered. We do not give you money for purchasing data. That is strictly the candidate's responsibility to ensure that they attend classes. Everything facilitators is available, and attendance plays a crucial role because at the end of the program, you will be awarded the JBS accredited certificate in skills development and just entrepreneurial knowledge.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Holly. Please stay on the call if there are other questions that will come up in the QA that we need to note around the application process.
Not a problem.
Thank you very much. Dear guests and participants, might I please remind you just to do the registration. The link is shared with Coulson, and as well complete the survey. I thought the session was amazing in terms of its content and in terms of the engagement with the questions. We would like to get some feedback about the session. Let me welcome our acting principal, Ms. Pendile Mkhwanazi, to say a few words as we close the session. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you so much to our colleagues from JBS who've come and made this a reality. When we heard about this program, we saw the need that it can assist us, especially for public servants that are retiring. But as you know, anyone, even the private sector, can benefit from this course that JBS is offering. What we want to say to public servants that are still in service, we are in the process of negotiating a better price for the program. It is a 6-month program online. We are in the discussion with the Center for Entrepreneur at the JBS to have a good rate to allow public servants to be able to enroll for this program. So the reason why we want you to register and send us your registration details is for us to also gauge the interest in this particular program so that we can be able to make it worthwhile for you as well as for our partner JBS in offering the program. As this National School of Government, we're always working with the different universities in partnership. This University of Johannesburg is one of our partners in offering training and assisting us in bringing knowledge in the public service. So please do enroll or email us and tell us your interest so that we can be able to see and decide on the next class that will be taken up. And we hope that with your interest, we can drive the cost down. So it's very important for you to respond to us to get this forward. We want to thank all the speakers that really shared their knowledge here. It was very insightful. And we believe that once you attend the program, you'll get even more information around some of the questions that might not have been answered. We know we ran out of time. We've got 3 minutes, and someone was still asking that Dr. Ngobo, if he could share those ventures that he thinks that can be explored. But yeah, because of time, we might not be able to do that. If he can do it in 1 minute, maybe Louise will allow him to just say a few words around that, just to squeeze in something there. Thank you so much, colleagues.
All right.
Thank you very much, Principal. Please, colleagues, the link is in the chat. Please just respond to the request from the Principal. Please, Doc, over to you.
No, it's just a few, low capital, particularly for those guys who are coming from training and development space. We've got childcare, we've got Airbnb, we've got these drop shipping, recruitment. We also have the tutorial consultations part of this. Remember that we are now, getting into digital economy. So these online tutoring, these reselling through, Take a Lot. We need to look into those aspects. We're talking about online course creation, which is I'm a big, I'm in that particular space where I develop modules and stuff like that. So I just wanted to touch on that, but I know that the time is not on our side. But for those guys who will be joining in, taking up this opportunity, we will actually dissect each and every of those small enterprises. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Doc. We really appreciate that input. There is a question about, is the course for free? Sadly, not. Principal has indicated that we will try to negotiate a better price. If you are leaving on retirement in the next month, please indicate your interest and let us know if you are interested in the course itself, and we will communicate with you directly, as well as with University of Johannesburg. Colleagues, this has been the most exciting 2-hour session around the retirement, around entrepreneurship. And through our speakers, we've actually been introduced by way of a few minutes to the actual course content. So if you are interested and excited about learning more, please make sure that we have your contact details, your name and your number, so that we can communicate with you further. I want to thank my speakers for making the time to be with us. Thank you, Holly, for sharing with us the information about the course. And thank you, Principal, for anchoring the session for us. Ladies and gentlemen, the webinar is closed. Have a wonderful day.